Now, I consider that I myself am a successful man in business. I hate business. I hate everything to do with it, accounting, he'll suddenly cheat me completely. But if I'm aware that he's a bit of a shyster, I feel comfortable. philosopher, mere philosopher, dealing in higher things, always insist that I be paid for my work. And I get the highest fee I can get. And people say, well, you're just out for money. I say, that's none of your business. Because I give most of it away. My own needs being extremely simple. Although I enjoy good food,